We're going to be going over a lot of different functions in this class as far as like what machines can Mimaki RasterLink7 do, a lot of its functions, and some like cool little tips and tricks that myself and the applications team and other print solution specialists have learned over the course of years using the program. Um, just a little rundown with Mimaki RasterLink7. This is our obviously 7th rendition of RasterLink. It is Mimaki proprietary software, which means Mimaki uses RasterLink to run all of its printers and machines. This also means that well, it doesn't mean that you don't have to use RasterLink. It's just the one we provide when we sell you the machine. So when you buy a Mimaki machine, RasterLink comes with it. You can obviously use any software you'd like, such as Onyx, Caldera, Flexi. There's a whole lot of other RIP softwares, but RasterLink is one that comes with it. And obviously, if you want to use the software that we provide, we give you a more in-depth class if you are so in tune. And since you guys are all here, thank you for coming. We'll make sure you get that information. This is a more inclusive list of all the machines that are supported, and kind of like an overview of RasterLink. As well as we have some more in-depth guides as well for things like ID cut, which is a print and cut function for using basically it's basically called a cutting link software. And basically it reads a barcode and it knows what cut to use when it reads that barcode. You don't have to like assign the cut or, say like this is the cut file I'm using when I'm cutting. You basically, machine reads the barcode, knows what to cut, and immediately cuts regardless of its orientation. And then there's also some links in here as well. Like I said before, we have the survey, and this presentation will be provided towards the end of the presentation. So if anyone wants that, just kind of stick around, and towards the end, you'll be able to get that link. So within Mimaki, we have technically 4, but for this class, we'll do 3 segments. We have industrial products or industrial printing, which is basically like our UV flatbed printing. We have our SG, our sign and graphics, which is going to be our roll-to-roll. So like your eco solvents, your UV roll-to-roll printers, that's going to be your sign and graphics. And then we have our textile and apparel. So that's going to be like your sublimation, your what's it called? TXF, so like your direct film printing. And then we also have direct to fabric printing as well. All of those segments can be run using RasterLink. The interface is going to be very similar. There's obviously some of them are going to have a little bit different things, like flatbeds obviously won't have tiling, things like that. But overall, it's going to once you buy a Mimaki, even if you go into another segment, it kind of translates directly. Just to go over it a little bit, we're going to talk about our different types of things. Like I said before, we have the eco solvents for our roll-to-roll. Eco solvents are going to be basically the ink goes into the material. The material has to be solvent receptive, and it is cured using heat. Eco solvents are really good with color fastness, and it is the traditional way to print. Eco solvents, well, solvent ink has been around for a long time, and now everybody's kind of moved more to eco solvent because saving the world is very important. So with eco solvents, you're able to have high print speeds as well as high color fastness. And because the ink is going into the material, the durability of the material becomes the durability of the ink, essentially, which is really good with eco solvents. Sublimation and direct to sublimation inks. Like I said, we have the transfer paper sublimation as well as printing directly to a fabric and then sublimating it that way. Basically, the way sublimation works is with the transfer, the ink goes onto the paper. You use a heat press to transfer the paper from the, I'm sorry, you use the heat transfer to transfer the ink from the paper to the fabric or whatever the final surface is. And then with direct sublimation, you're printing directly to the fabric that you want to sublimate. Both methods work. It's just a matter of different types of inks and different fixation process. Next, we have the UV curable inks. UV curable inks is going to be like, I want to say like a more newer technology. A lot of printers have now started adopting UV inks as well. With UV curable inks, basically your ink is sitting on the surface of the material. And the importance of that is because the ink is sitting on the surface now, essentially you can print to virtually anything. It just has to, adhere properly. Um, with UV curable, it's cured with a UV radiation light, which means basically the light goes over it, so there's minimal heat involved, as well as with UV, you're able to get textures. So with UV, we have a opaque white and an opaque clear ink. I'm sorry, opaque white and a clear ink. And with those, we can get really cool effects and textures. And later on, we'll talk about some of those types of textures and how Mimaki approaches that. And then here we have a bunch of different types of inks. I'm not going to go over all of them, but this is just to kind of further explain that Mimaki, again, we kind of take pride in what we do. And this shows you that we have like a very uh, chemical resistant hard ink, which is our LH100, all the way up to our super flexible LUS 350 thermal ink, thermoforming ink, which allows, for extreme forming up to 350% flex. So obviously all of our machines don't offer all of these inks, but depending on your application and what you're producing, and the machine that you are looking at, myself and the team, we're able to kind of coordinate, oh, we believe that this machine would be the best fit for you based on the, pieces per hour you want to do, or your application, or what the adhesion needs to look like, that sort of thing. Again, this is just more information on the UV. I'm not going to spend too much time on it because I don't want to, stick you guys on too much on our inks when really what we're looking for is the RasterLink area. The UV adhesion, like I said before, we have the UV ink sits on top of the material. What's great about our UV inks is we also have a jettable primer that we can jet through our print head on a lot of our flatbed printers. And it's really helpful when you need UV adhesion. Obviously, there's a lot of other treatments such as like the Corona treatment, flame treatments. You can also do wipe-on primers as well. But we also have a general primer that works on most surfaces. Obviously, there's going to be, like a lot of materials that don't want to be printed on, such as like laminate and things like that. So that's the type of things that you would use primers for. And this is kind of examples of our primers. We have a jettable primer, which is the PR200, and then we have a wipe-on primer as well. Oh, and this kind of goes on what I was saying before about the corona treatment, plasma treatment, or flame treatment, and then different types of primers that we've used within Mimaki that we found to be very uh, convenient and helpful. We kind of go, these are like our go-to when we start off, and then if we have any issues, we escalate it further from that. Printing precautions. This one's kind of important. Whenever you're printing with UV, especially with the flatbeds, the key thing is you want to make sure that your media is the same height throughout the full length of the carriage that it travels over. And what I mean by that, if you kind of look at the first one, the good one, how the jig or anything, like if you have pieces and you have spaces between your pieces, you want to make sure you're filling those gaps. The reason being is if you're not filling the gaps, what happens is the UV light now, instead of the print head being 1.5 or 2 millimeters above the media thickness, now because there's like, let's say, I don't know, an inch gap, the lamp now can reflect light from the surface back onto the head. And remember when I was saying like we're curing with a UV light. If that light reaches the print heads, now you're curing your print heads, and you don't want to do that. So the most important thing I like to tell everybody is make sure that whatever media you're printing to, you want that thickness to be uniform throughout the entire travel of the print head. Um, Anyone that has a Mimaki machine, there are two very, very, very important um, uh, what is these like end user adjustments or machine alignments that I want to go over. The first one's going to be drop position, and that's going to be feet comp. Um, the importance of these two, I guess let's talk about the encoder strip first. The encoder strip basically kind of tells you what these basically where the ink needs to be dropped based on where the carriage is. Um, your encoder strip is going to be along the Y bar, basically where the carriage travels across of. And basically, the reason I want to note this is over time, I would say like several years, if you're not cleaning the machine or wiping it down for dust and stuff builds up on the machine. If you're ever noticing that like you're getting fuzzy prints or um, it seems like just accuracy isn't there and you've done all your alignments, I like to always mention to everybody, make sure you check your encoder strip because your encoder strip definitely, if you just wipe it with say like a lip-free cloth or you just wipe along the full strip of it, it can definitely help. But make sure that you're not applying any cleaner or anything like that to it because that can damage the encoder strip. Again, this is very important for using the printer. If your encoder strip doesn't work, then you have to replace it. Drop position. So drop position is going to be when your carriage is going basically left and right. Because these are bi-directional printers, it prints going in the left direction and it prints going in the right direction. Your drop position basically aligns the printing in the left and the printing in the right prints essentially. And what you're seeing here is basically if you run that alignment, it runs a chart just very similar to this. Now, the lines may not be aligned. Like for this one, for instance, the best one that matches up is 0. Ideally, when you get your machine installed and the technicians do their machine alignments, ideally it will be 0. But over time, it may shift to maybe -2 or +3 or something like that, depending on the thickness of the material you have or just time in general. So this is a very, very, very simple way to kind of readjust your alignments. Um, I do this all the time whenever I'm testing new material or whenever I'm changing material. A lot of machines are able to have multiple media profiles, which means they can save multiple drop positions and multiple feed comps. So please, please, please make sure you're utilizing that because it's a very easy way. Say you only use 5 materials in your shop, setting your drop position and your feed comp for those 5 materials, and then you just change um, the machine profile depending on the material you have. So the feed comp, like I said, drop position is your left and right. Your feed comp is going to be your up and down, which means basically when it prints in one direction, it feeds the machine forward, or if you're using a flatbed, um, the carriage goes back a little bit. Basically what that's doing is the stepping. And you want to make sure that you're aligning that stepping as well, because say I wanted to print a true 4 foot by 8 foot board, but my feed comp is off and it's overlapping a little bit, it won't be 4 feet in the length. It'll be 3 feet, 11 inches and some change, you know? So accuracy, if you're seeing like banding and things like that, sometimes it's not even the nozzle. Sometimes it's because your feed comp is off because it has a white little gap. So when that gap is, the feed comp isn't touching properly, then you're seeing a white line or a light line in there and it's not necessarily banding, it's really the feed comp's off. So those two things I wanted to make sure I address with you guys because they're very, very, very simple end user adjustments to do. And a lot of times these things can be done within like 5 minutes. And it fixes the machine for where you need versus, you calling your dealer or a technician to come out, you know, pay that or whatever, and they're only there for 5, 10 minutes for something simple. All right, so next we're going to go over our RasterLink tools and functions. Within RasterLink, there are a lot of functions on the side. Let me make sure. I want to make sure I pull this up for you guys so you can see it. I want this join. Sorry, one second. I'm just adding my other one so you can see. Okay, there we go. Okay. So I want to go over our RasterLink tool functions. Uh, Actually, I apologize. Let me switch back really quickly. Want to go over the next slide first, and then we'll go to actual RasterLink. So in RasterLink, there are a lot of functions essentially on the right-hand side of RasterLink. I like to call them like mini apps because essentially that's what they are. And each one has a different function, right? So you have, I'm not going to go over all of these in length right here because we're actually going to go into RasterLink. But a lot of the common ones that you're going to see are going to be like your print conditions tab, which is basically where you do like your profiles and your resolutions. You have your general print, tiling, step and repeat, and variable edit and jig print. That's going to be the ones basically where you're laying out your print file. We can also do layering, composition, where you put like multiple layers on top of each other. You can do favorites, color replacements, special plates, which is another important one. If you have special colors for UV specifically, um, you can able to do white, clear, primer, and if your machine has silver as well, we do offer silver. You can have silver plates, which basically allows you to mask anywhere there's a pixel of color with a pixel of whatever that special color is. Easy way to do those things. And then there's obviously like duplicate, backup, delete, those sort of things. But we're going to go all in those in depth in a second. I just want to get through these slides first. Uh, um, oh, wait, I guess we're doing now. So let me click over. All right, perfect. All right, so I just want to make sure, Chris, you can see my screen, correct? Just to make sure.
No, sir, I cannot actually. I'm sorry.
You
No.
cannot.
No.
No. Hold on, let me try that one more time.
Thank you. Now I
There we
can.
go. Perfect. All right, thank you. All right, so within RasterLink, there we go. Within RasterLink, you're able to have, obviously, just to go over the main functions of everything. On the top left here, you're going to have your ink sets. When you're connected to your computer, you're going to see like the levels of your inks and what ink colors you have there available. In the middle here is going to be your job queue. Any files that you load up here, you're going to see the print files for it. On the bottom left here is going to be when you're printing, your jobs are going to basically load here. So they're going to rip and then they're going to have like a print load bar. Basically, while it's printing, it's going to be showing here in your job queue on the left. On the bottom left here, you see I have four basically tabs here. These are four Mimaki printers that I have already installed on my RasterLink. So I have a CJB330, which has its own job list. I have a UCJB330, which has its own job list, UCJB300, as well as a UJF6042. So you can have up to four printers attached to one RasterLink. And that's really, really important because, like we said before, whenever you buy a machine from Mimaki, you get a copy of RasterLink7. But that doesn't mean you have to use RasterLink7 for ideally for every machine. If you have up to four machines, all of that can be run off of one computer, which is very helpful because not everybody wants to buy a computer for every machine. On the right side here, is basically going to change depending on what tab you're on. So on the right side here, we have all the tabs, and those are the tabs I was going over earlier. We'll kind of go through each one so you guys can see exactly what each one is. So we'll start with the first one, which is going to be the Properties tab. Basically, within the Properties tab, you're going to see a lot of general information. So like when you rip a file, what size is the file? A lot of that's going to be under the first area. So like what size is the file? Is it a PDF or not, the name of it. You can also change the names if you want to. It's going to have the default quality information, which is going to be based off of your favorites, which we'll get to in a second. But basically, you can see from here what resolution you'll be printing at, what profile you'll be printing at, pass counts, if is it uni or bidirectional, as well as like where the file is and have you printed it, those sorts of things. So this is, like I said, a very general overview. It helps a lot. I can go to one where I've printed a lot of files. So I can kind of see, like for this file that we printed for Printing United last September, October, one of those months. You can see I printed this back in 2022. This is a super old file. And I use a 600 by 1200 resolution printed on dry tack material with this profile, this pass count, high, bidirectional. And it was a multi-layer print, and it was printed color and then special color on top, which means it was probably color and then clear on top. So you can kind of get, like I said, general overview of your files when you're looking through the Properties tab. I'm going to skip over this one for a second. We're going to go to the Quality tab next. And the Quality tab, like I said before, is going to be basically where you're controlling your resolutions. So within the Quality tab, you're going to have your ink set. Ideally, this will not change because once you ink your machine up with an ink set, that's going to be the ink you're going to use. But we do have color profiles for majority of our ink sets, which means obviously I'm gonna have multiple ink sets on here. But you would pick your ink set and make sure you're downloading your profiles with your ink sets. Your media, depending on your profiles that you download, your media selection is going to be selected here. Let's say I'm printing on acrylic. And then under here, I guess I only have one profile for acrylic. But if I were to choose, let's see, white PET gloss, I have LD1 and LD2 and UV. Oh, this is the flatbed. Yeah. And then you also have multiple resolutions depending on your media profile that you have. The resolutions, essentially the smaller the number, the lower amount of dots per square inch. So what that means is like for 1200 by 1200, it's be printing 16 pass, which is going to be more ink. And it's going to take a little bit more time because now it has to track over essentially every line 16 times, not 16 times and then move forward, but it's basically dividing the print head up by 16 and then it's moving in that fashion. If I go to 600 by 600, which is probably a fourth of the speed, yeah, or half of the speed, which is 8. So now we're down to 8 pass, which cuts that print time down in half. Make sure you're utilizing proper profiles for proper files. So if you have like a very detailed image or you're trying to do like photography or something like that, the lowest resolution might not be the best option for you in that sense. But again, whenever you're doing stuff like that, please, please, please test. Because a lot of people, I've gone to a lot of shops where people only use the highest resolution because they want it to look the best. And then they don't even think to probably try the lower resolutions because they just assume that, oh, it's lower, so it's going to be worse. And that's not the case with Mimaki. A lot of the times it just depends on what you're printing to and what it looks like. Because a 1200 by 1200 print might have more like richness in your black inks and the light and the dark comparison. But that doesn't mean that necessarily like a 6x9 or 6x12 won't also give you that same look. And if you can cut your print time down by 25%, by 50%, why not do that, right? So again, I'm just information that you guys, I believe, should be utilizing. You can also control based off of after you click your resolution, you can also change the pass count from default. So if I'm under 600 by 600, I can change the pass count to up to 10 passes for this printer. This is again the UJF 6042. If I go to 600 by 1200, it goes to 16. I can up it even further to 20. Let me switch to a non main unidirectional machine, specifically because I want to show for the bidirectional portion. If you have a bidirectional printer, you can change it to unidirectional. If you are having alignment issues, this is an easy way to kind of fix that because now your alignments don't need to be, adjusted. To like if you're doing like your bidirectional alignment and you can't like get it perfectly, sometimes using unidirectional is the safest bet. Obviously, now you're doubling your print time because it's only printing in one direction. But if you have that last minute job and you got to get it out, this is a really good one. Another good thing for unidirectional is making sure that if you have like really, really, really fine type and you can't align it with the alignments like for a drop position, unidirectional also helps in that fashion as well. And then towards the bottom, you have some other adjustments that you're allowed to do. You can do pinch roller settings, color pattern, I don't really utilize too much. Device adjustment, this one's good for your feeds if you need to do it. Again, a lot of this stuff I'd recommend doing on the machine itself and not in RasterLink because this makes it job specific. If you're doing it on the machine, it makes it machine specific. So that means that the machine is going to control it, which is what panel setting means, versus the software or RasterLink is controlling it. And then we also have some checkboxes here that over time we've made a lot of updates where Mimaki has utilized like what we believe to be the best white recommend density. What we recommend printing with white ink, how, check this box and it'll reduce the graininess for it. Overprint setting, which means that like if you have layers, this will recognize that there's layers in the file. So these are a lot of things that people don't utilize. Most people don't even go to this page. They say, oh, it was set up for me. I don't touch anything because it prints. Well, now you know what these options are. We'll go to color matching later because there's an actual small setting for that. And if we have time, I'll get more into it. But this is basically where you control your input profiles. So let's say if I do my test one real quick, I can change my color from relative to perspective to, saturation, absolute. And these are just basically color, or I can change my input profiles to, if I had a specific one that I downloaded, I could change them to those as well. I'll get into those if we have time towards the end, but color matching and color profiling is kind of like a class on its own, so I don't want to spend too much time on that. But if anyone does have specific questions, like I said, on that specific thing, please feel free to ask and I'll go more into detail. Next, we're going to go to crop. So crop marks or cropping basically is exactly what it sounds like. You can have an image and you can crop it. There's two ways you can crop it. You can use the numbers up here and change it how you see fit, or you can actually just drag it. Say if I only wanted one of these images, I can drag it exactly to where I wanted it to be. I mean, pretty simple. And then when I go back, we'll go to the next one, which is general print. Now you see under general print, instead of seeing 3 images, only going to see 1 image. So getting cropping is pretty self-explanatory. With general print, now that we're already in general print, this is going to be this green tab right here. General print is going to be your layout. Basically, I will say all printers, you generally use general print, unironically. This is where basically you can scale your file. So say if I wanted this to be 200% larger, I can make it 200% bigger. I can also, here, let me scoot this over a little bit so we can see it all. I can also change it back to its actual size. Say if I wanted this to be 12 inches, I can do that as well. So you can do it whether it be percentage-wise or the actual numbers. You can rotate in here. You can reverse it if you're doing clear prints, second surface, or if you're doing transfers. I can change the position. I can drag it if I wanted to, or say if I want a 1 inch off the edge, I can do 1 inch off the edge. I want multiple copies. Say if I need 5, I can put 5 copies. And let me zoom out so we can see it. This is a roll-to-roll machine, so this is a 64-inch printer. So if I were printing with 64-inch media, this is what the nesting up will look like. And I could also change it from block to each move. So if you want to see each one, but for computer running sake, if you have too many of the each move, it kind of starts to lag out your computer. it's safe layout. Right now, they're all nested directly next to each other. Say I wanted a 1/2 inch spacing in between each one. Now I have a 1/2 inch between each image. Uh, the next tab will be our register marks. If you're going to do print and cut, definitely recommend using register marks. Right now they're off. And then the first one's going to be type 1, second is type 2, third is type 3. Generally speaking, most people always use type 1. Once you kind of use a register mark, you kind of stick with that because you have to tell your machine, I'm using this register mark. By default, most people just use the type 1, but you have the type 2 if you want to save space, and the type 3 if you want uniformity as well. The mark size default is usually 0.394, but you can up it depending on if you're printing on a flatbed or if you just want a larger crop mark because the image is bigger. We do also have intermediate crop marks for roller roll printing. So say, well, I don't want it in that direction. Say I had 25 images. Now, instead of the crop mark being from, I guess let me back up a little bit. There's 2 ways you can do crop marks. You can do individual, which means it'll put crop marks around, let me zoom in a little bit. It'll put crop marks around each individual piece. So what'll happen here is it'll print it all, or it'll print all of them. It'll come back, read the first crop mark, cut this one out. Read the second crop mark, cut that one out. Obviously, that's going to take forever. So you could also do whole image, which means basically it puts a crop mark around the entirety of what you're printing. So there's one on the bottom left, bottom right corner. It'll go all the way to the top right, top left corner. Let's just do 24 because it makes sense. With intermediate crop marks, what it'll do is after it'll basically place an additional crop mark in the middle, and you can control how many of those are. And what that allows for is it'll prevent skewing, because when the machine is feeding forward and backwards, it can, the track, because you're feeding material, it can get off. So having those intermediate crop marks help make sure the machine always knows where it should be cutting at all times. You're also able to allow photobo marks as well. You can put in a cut line because this has a wait, can't put in a cut line. Let me check on a different printer. I'm pretty sure that's printer specific. Yeah, it is. I think only the flatbeds allow for it. But basically what that does is it puts a line around your image. It's really good for, say, like flatbed printing. Say you wanted to print on, I don't know, books. You want to print on the covers of books, but you want to know like where you need to put your book on the table in order for it to line up. You can basically print like, or you want to like cut out like a dotted line around it. Say this didn't have full color, it was like white space, and you wanted to have like a dotted line around it so you know where it needs to be cut. You can kind of put the cut line around there. Let's go back to what we were doing. You can add photobo marks, which is another cutter, but we do also have that integrated in RasterLink, as well as you can add information. So any information that you want to add on the print file, like when it was printed, what resolution, color profile. I can even write on here, hot job this morning, ASAP. And this will let whoever's finishing it or anything like that know that this needs to be cut out immediately because it'll be actually printed above the actual print file. So before, when I was talking, I skipped the arrangement tab. So let me drop these back to one copy real quick. So if I can do copies of each individual piece. Under the arrangement tab, let me get one that I have like some set up perfectly. Under the arrangement tab, if I have, oh, these are massive. I know I have 2 files. Okay, let's just use these two. Under the arrangement tab, sorry, let's use these 3 flyers. I can select multiple different files. Go to the arrangement tab and say I want to have, again, 1-inch spacing in between each file. I want them arranged in the center. I hit arrange. Now these 3 files are linked together, as you can see under this tab, arranged. And now if I go to general print again, I'm going to see all 3 of those files. What's really important about this is now I can print multiple files in one print job. And I can control each file and how it's nested. So like, for instance, this first one, which is going to be the pink one, I can control how many copies of this one I have. I can have 5 copies of this one. Let's say the black one, I only need 2 copies for, and the purple one, we'll put 3 copies for that one. Down here on the bottom, I can hit this button rearrange, which is right next to the minimize button. I'll click that, and now all of these are arranged based off of minimizing print area. Because this is a weird, I guess that's the best it can do, because I'm guessing that can't fit there. Yeah, it won't be able to fit in there. So yeah, I mean, again, this is very helpful when you're doing, actually, I could probably rotate the black one. Let's try that. Maybe that'll give me a better yield. Yep, perfect. Really helpful when you just have a bunch of files and you know you need to print them all on the same material. Instead of sending each job individually, you can arrange them all together. And that's the purpose for arrangement. The next thing is tiling. I have a file already ready for tiling. So tiling tab obviously is going to be used for things that are printed larger than your media. So really important for, like, say you're putting up vinyl on walls, or you're doing not necessarily vehicle wraps, because probably vehicle wraps you wouldn't use the tiling function. You'd probably use templates for that. But anything basically you're printing it larger than your material, but you want it to align. And actually, let me use the one that had text, because it'll probably make more sense. So with the tiling function, looks very similar to general print, and that's because it basically replaces general print. So you can see this checkbox right now. If this isn't checked, you see general print is available, and we're able to utilize that one. But if I want to use the tiling function, I go to tiling, I turn tiling on under the tiling edit, and now tiling edit is going to be what utilizes my layout instead of general print. Within this, you're going to see some very similar things. Obviously, you can scale, rotate, do all the same things. The only difference is now there's going to be tiling specific options. So I can choose like what my tile size is going to be. Let's say I'm printing on 64-inch media. I want my tiles to be 60 inches. And I'm going to apply it to all tiles. So now instead of having 4 like I had, I now have 3 tiles, and you can see one's 60, 60, and then the last one's gonna be 48 inches. You can also do resizing if you need to, as well as you can create your overlap. And this is very important because anyone that does window graphics or wall graphics, they know that the overlap is very important. If you have your designer set up the overlap, it's more of a pain than necessary. I used to do pre-press, and I know that having RIP software that does it for you, all I have to do is provide you with the overall print, and the RIP software do it for you. Much, much, much easier. Depending on what you're putting up, it'll be anywhere between 1/2 an inch to, I've seen up to 3 inches really with overlap, but it just depends on what your shop, wants to utilize. You can also change which direction the overlap is coming from. And then you can also say, if for whatever reason, say this was not 91 inches, say I wanted the tiles to be cut in half even further. So say I wanted it to be a 60 by 60 tile. I can actually tile in the Y direction as well. And then I can do overlaps for those as well. You can also print an overlap line. So it can kind of tell you like, oh, when you're installing it, make sure you're lining it up to this line. And then that way, you know where to cut for the overlap. Or some people don't cut. It just depends on what you're doing again. You can print it with the tile numbers if you want, so that way when they're installing it, they know, oh, this one goes next to this one, depending on, some artwork is going to be easy to just see how it aligns. So tile number is very important. You can print that on there as well as you can have it print the tiles in different order. And this, I will go and explain why that's important. So whenever you're printing, let me change this back to what it originally was. Whenever you're printing, and this is a perfect example, if I were to print this file, there's 3 tiles right now, and it would print the first tile, it'll go from blue to red, and then it would print the second tile from blue to red. What print order allows you to do is basically flip every other tile. So what that means is it'll print this one from blue to red, and it'll print the second tile from red to blue. And the reason why that's important is because over time, whenever you're printing, obviously ink colors may shift slightly. But sometimes it's not drastic enough for your eye to catch unless you're printing it at multiple times. And I've noticed that printing something that's over 8 feet, you don't want to have to reprint something that's that long. So if you're utilizing the print order, if you print it where it basically alternates every other tile, it kind of masks that color shift that can happen over time. Because it's printing the red right after it's printing the red, and that helps a lot. But I've noticed that like sometimes if you print blue to red, blue to red, blue to red, and you do that the entire, say there's like 10 tiles, you might notice that like towards the beginning of your print, your red looked great, and then towards the end, it's not that the red didn't look great, it's that the red kind of looked different. So sometimes utilizing just one click on the RasterLink might help, alternate that for you. And this is more machine specific XY slitter stuff. I'm not going to get into that. But yeah, this is pretty much your tiling edit. Very powerful tool for tiling, obviously. Next, we will go to step and repeat, and I am going to utilize that other file for that. Like over. So with step and repeat, again, like I said, we have general print, we have tiling. Now we're going to step and repeat. Again, because this is another editing, you have to make sure you check it, and then it turns off all the other edits. So with step and repeat, actually, I don't know why I chose this file now because you won't be able to notice that it's step and repeating. Let's choose this one. Do I not have? Yeah, we'll choose that one. So with step and repeat, here you go. Sorry about that. So with step and repeat, again, scaling, rotation, position, very standard with editing files, layouts. But now you also have step and repeat settings. And step and repeat settings are going to be pretty simple. We have some pre-set up nesting. And actually, let me scale this down to probably like 12 by 12. There we go. So now we can actually see what's happening in the file. So with step and repeat, you have a bunch of different options that you can kind of change it with. And it kind of just changes the way that the file steps, essentially, right? Which is just a click of a button. You can also change the offset, but because I only have the one file, it kind of offsets, just like as a checkerboard. But if you had multiple files, you can have it step and repeat, and you can see different images in here. You can control how long, or also if you have like a repeated pattern. It's really big for like the textile industry because they have like a 12 by 12 inch square, and then they just repeat that pattern as long as they need a 5 foot by 20 foot of this pattern. They just take that pattern, load it in here, and then say I need what is 5 feet, 60 inches by 120 feet. We'll say 10 feet or 120 inches. I'm sorry. RasterLink automatically makes this pattern all the way up to 120 feet or 120 inches for you, which is 10 feet. So step and repeat, really simple again. And then you can also center it if you'd like to. Again, another powerful tool that you don't have to make your own patterns for yourself. You can just make the initial 12 by 12 swatch, put it in a RasterLink, and it'll do the rest for you. The next tab, we're not going to go too in detail to it, but I do want to mention that we do also have variable print. And I don't think I'm able to hit it because I don't have a PDF file built into it. We're actually going to skip that one because variable print is very specific. Again, another one that has a lot into it. But we're going to skip over variable print. The next one, which is probably the biggest one because it is a printer, is going to be your execution. So once you have your file and everything's nested, you have your resolution under your quality tab set up, you have everything's nested, you've laid it out properly. The next, maybe, depending on if you have to do color corrections or not, you're probably going to want to print it, right? So you're going to hit execution. And with RasterLink7, you're able to print a couple different ways. And I'll go ahead and explain to you what all 4 of these mean. So your most common one is going to be rip and print. And that one's very simple. It's literally going to rip your file and then it's going to print it. Very simple. There are going to be times where you want to just rip the file by itself. And the reason being you'd want to do that is say you're doing tiling, right? And those files, it's instead of 10 feet, you're doing 30 feet or 50 feet. It might be a good idea to rip the file up front if you're not, say if you're not printing it right away, you can rip the file up front. That way it's ready to print later. So rip only or print only. If it's ripped, I believe, trying to see if I have an example of what it looks like. Oh, if it's ripped, the letters of the job name go bold. So that's a good indicator. Plus, if you look under your properties tab, it'll tell you that it's ripped. So this one, I've already ripped it, but I've never printed it. So it's just a good little indicator of like what ripping does. Also, ripping gives you your ink consumption. Sorry, I'm looking for that file I was printing. There we go. Ripping gives you your ink consumption, which we'll go over in a bit as well. And then afterwards, you can just do print only, and then it won't have to rip it, which means that say you have a job that you've printed one time and it took, I don't know, 10 minutes to rip it, and you got to print another copy. Instead of ripping and printing it again, just do print only if you're not changing anything, and then it'll just print the already ripped data. Immediate print, this one's very machine specific. Actually not machine specific, it's computer specific. What this basically means is as it's ripping, it's going to begin printing. The only issue with this is if your computer can't rip it faster than it can print it, it's going to stall the printer. I've seen sometimes where it actually just doesn't, if it stalls for too long, it loses the job. And I've seen sometimes where like it'll stall, it'll wait like a couple seconds and it'll do the next pass, wait a couple seconds. So it just more so depends on your computer. Most people use rip and print because it's just the most common way to print. But I want to again show you what all 4 mean. Executions basically means after it does this rip and print job, how many times do I want it to rip it and print it? And this one's really big for print and cut jobs. There's a lot of times where I will set up this, for instance, we'll go over this one. Let me do this. Say I wanted to kind of quickly nest this up so we can kind of give you a great example. Say I wanted to print and cut these 3 prints. Let's put a 1" between them. But instead of it, there we go. Whole 1" in between each one. Okay, perfect. So it's going to print, cut these out, and read the crop marks around these 3. Instead of me nesting, say I have to do 1,000 of these. Instead of nesting 1,000 and it printing 1,000 and then coming back and trying to cut 1,000, that means that it's going to print 1,000 on the roll, on the take up. But then when it comes back and rolls it all the way back to the front, there is no take up in the back, right? It's not motorized. It's just 2 rollers that is kind of just free holding. So that means that it's going to feed 1,000 prints back onto the floor. And most people don't keep, their floor the greatest at print shops. Not saying that your print shop isn't great. I'm just saying that you don't want your media to touch the ground, essentially. It's not ideal. So one thing that I kind of recommend is instead of doing that many, maybe I print maybe 6 copies. And now what it'll do, it'll print this, cut this 6, and then I can execute this job. Once it gets to execute, come on. I can execute this job if I do 10, 6 times 10 is 60, right? So that'll be 60 pieces that'll literally print it, cut it, print it, cut it. And it'll do that process 10 times. This is probably the most efficient way to print and cut because it just basically allows the machine to constantly do those 2 sequences, printing and then cutting over and over. I want to see, I know I have a print and cut file. Here we go. If you have a print and cut file, which means when you rip a file over, it'll separate it with the print or the cut lines. And again, we'll go over how to set up cut lines in a minute. But under the execution, now you can see that this is not grayed out because there's a cut line on this print file. You can select if you want it to print only, cut only, or print and cut. And print and cut basically means, like I said, it'll print the full job and it'll come back and cut it immediately. There's no input from the, you as the user for the machine. The machine just knows that after I print this, I need to cut it and then we're done. But if you're going to laminate, you need the option to print it only and then come back and cut it only, because if the machine isn't going to laminate it for you. You have to take it off the machine, laminate it, and then put it back on the machine to cut it. So that's why these 2 options exist. And then obviously we also have our ink consumption estimate as well. This helps I'm not gonna be able to do it because I'm not connected to a machine, but I can give you an example of what it looks like. Hopefully, I know I have jobs that are ripped. Hopefully, yeah, there we go. Oh wow, I might have changed everything. Well, uh-oh. Oh, well, let's see real quick. Maybe, yes, I'm not connected. But when you're connected to your computer, it'll give you your ink consumptions as well without even having to rip the job. This was again another update that we provided with RasterLink. I believe when RasterLink7 first came out, this wasn't even an option. So again, we constantly update our script softwares. And then I also want to honorable mention these last 2 options, which is delete rip data after print and delete job after print. I cannot stress how many times I've gotten phone calls about, I'm not understanding what my RasterLink's doing. Every time I print a job, it deletes it after. There's a checkbox. Delete job after print. If you don't want it to delete job after print, don't check the box. So if you ever run into those issues, just be aware that those boxes exist. And this is how you fix it. Occasions when you might need to use it would be like inside of RasterLink, you can have up to 200 jobs within RasterLink at a time. So if you're a company who's constantly using new jobs and you don't do any repeat jobs, maybe delete job after print might be something that you need. That way, as you're printing, you're not having to go through here, go and delete all your, delete the jobs manually. It'll delete it for you. But again, if you don't want that, make sure you're not checking that checkbox. Next thing we want to do is layering, and I'm trying to think. Let's do this job. So I'm just going to separate it, yeah. So and this is the red one right here, composition. I'm sorry, I said layering. Composition. Under the composition tab, this is going to be how you layer your jobs together. That's essentially what the composition is. So right now I'm going to release them just so we can kind of see. Ideally, or normally when you bring your layers in, so this is a 4-layer print. So I have 4 different files. I have the top, I have the white layer, I have the black layer, and then I have the bottom layer or the second color layer. So I'm going to select all 4 of those layers, and it brings it into this composition tab area. Right now, obviously I already had them nested in the correct directions, but say, I don't know, this one was supposed to be on the bottom and this one's supposed to be on the top. You literally just drag and drop them in the order that you want them to be. This is roll, yes. The other important thing is your output order. If you are on a flatbed, let me back up for a second. Let me just show you roll first. So with the roll, after you have them in order, you'll just hit composite, and then it'll not only link them together under the job list, it tells you might want to check your print settings, but it'll also kind of layer them. So it says like output order 1. So what this means is that when this is printing, all 4 of these layers are going to be printed in one pass. Meaning that it's not going to print one layer, then go back to the beginning, print another layer, then go back to the beginning, print another layer, and go back to the beginning. It's going to print them all within one pass on the roll. For a flatbed, let's see if I know Carissa has files for me. Let me actually I don't want to use those. If you have a flatbed, and with a flatbed, it can only print up to 2 layers at a time. So when you're doing your this printer, when you're doing your composition and the output order, it'll probably say like 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, that sort of thing. So just be aware of like how the output order is set up, because under quality, I need another file. I apologize. I completely forgot about having layering files. So let me grab these off my desktop really quickly. Sorry, give me 1 second. Trying to make sure I get these right. Perfect. Bring it back. All right. So I have my 5 files here. This is going to be a 5-layer print. Obviously it's for the UCJV, but I just want to show you what layering looks like on the flatbed really quickly. So like I said, when you bring in files, you file open, select your file. Once you select all your files, they come over here in the job queue. they rip first and then they go into your job queue. And I could make these larger if I needed to. I'm not going to spend the time on doing the color replacement and everything for all these files. I just want to show y'all what the layering process looks like. So if I have all 5 of these files, layer them together, I go to the composition. Now under the composition tab, say when I hit, now you have your priority policy. And the importance of this is basically with the flatbeds, because it can only print up to 2 layers at a time. If I do quality, that means it's going to do everything individually. So now you're going to see it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep. So output order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I do speed, it'll basically, if there's a color and a white layer together, or a color and a clear layer, or something like, those type of combinations, and it can print them together, it'll basically do like 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 1, or 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. The least amount of output orders you have, the faster the print will be, essentially. So be mindful if you're ever printing in layers and your output order doesn't necessarily match what you're trying to do. It's probably because the priority policy was on quality instead of speed. Actually, let's just see. I don't think it's going to change anything, because I haven't actually changed these to, well, I can kind of see if I can quickly do them really quickly. I changed this to, oh, this doesn't have white ink. Okay, I can't even do it because this machine didn't even have white ink. But if your machine has white ink, that's what it'll look like under the composition tab. So this is going to be how you layer your files. Very, very simple thing to do. It's literally bottom up. So the one that's on the bottom is going to print on the bottom, and the one that's on the top is going to be the topmost layer, essentially, and then everything in between. All right, so we've done. Oh, next one I want to do is jig print. And it's not even open or available. But I do want to show you guys what it looks like. Oh, it is available. I'm just blind. So jig print, basically, oh, let's not use this file. So jig print is going to be this one right here. Basically with jig print, say you have a bunch of pieces on a flatbed table. Again, jig print's going to be specific to flatbeds. And you have individual pieces that you already have pre-cut or already pre-made, and you want to print to them. But you want to make sure that your file is aligned to those individual pieces. So for instance, I have like a card jig already set up. But you can see my file is a little bit bigger than that. So what we'll do is we'll just adjust the definition of the jig print. And right now it is set up as read only, and I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is just make a test one. Now I could change everything. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on jig print, just because jig print is very, very another one that is very involved. But essentially with jig print, I could control the overall jig size. So right now the jig size is set for the table size, which is usually ideal. But if you want to have it, if you're doing like say a 4x8 JFX 200 table, you might not want to have your jig to be a 4x8. You might want to have it a 4x4 or a 2x4, or something like that, where it can kind of nest a little bit better. I can control the position of the jig, which is kind of the nesting of it, but again, it's the size of the table, so I don't need to worry about it. Angle as well, but probably don't necessarily need to change that unless you put it on there not straight. But the material size is going to be the key one. I can control how big the material is. So let's say for this one, I want it to be 2x3, which is common size. And let's just say, for instance, I want it to be 4x4 space, or count size. And I can also control how much space is in between each piece. Let's say I want, I don't know, 6 inches in between each piece, and let's put 4. I think that fits. Yeah, perfect. And then I want the layout of this to be in the center. So now with this, I just make sure that the size matches. So I made it 3 by 2. So we'll make this 3 by 2 and don't rotate it. There you go. So now this will print directly in the center. Let's see, actually, it made it smaller. There we go. So now this will print directly in the center, and now I can just put the copies up. And now my jig that I have on my table, whether I print, there's 2 ways you can do this. You can print the jig, which means I can go in, print the jig outline. It'll basically print these black lines around, basically make that a print file. Well, I'll save it to my computer, and then I can load that print file into RasterLink. And basically, it'll print just these black lines. And I can put down, like scrap paper or something like that, and then have the vacuum hold that paper down. And now I can nest, if these were, say, like business cards, I could put the business cards in these squares. And now I can just hit print. Just hit the copies and hit print. Again, this is very easy for using whenever you have a POP object, or just any product that isn't, you're not cutting out of. So like usually in 4x8, so you print a 4x8 and then you cut the whole thing out afterwards. But say you have like already your pre-cut pieces, jig print is great for already pre-cut pieces. Very powerful. And you can have up to as many different ones as you want. If I have one for mobile phones, I could do that. Yeah, books. We've done books at the last show. It's just, again, a lot of different jigs that they're out there. Next thing we'll get into is the color replacement tab. I will go under the UV because I know my UV files. We'll call out color better, right? I believe. Of course, not this file. Just trying to find a file real quick that I can. Oh, well, I can just use this one. So, with color replacement, you have 3 tabs up here. You have spot color. Spot color basically is, if you're in Illustrator, you name the color what it is. Whether it's Pantone 385 or old 26 or whatever the color may be. It'll say the color name here, and basically it'll replace it within our libraries. CMYK values, if it's vector, CMYK values will show up here. And this is basically how you do color replacements if you don't know what the color is supposed to be. But let's say, because I know with the Mimaki logo, I could do blink indication, and it'll blink where on the, what is actually going to be color replacing with that color. But say I want to replace this and I want it to make the color and select the color from the color library. I can open up the color library and select, let's do pan code coded 4. And I want to select Pantone color 185, which I believe is our color, maybe. So now it'll replace, instead of the CMYK value, it'll replace it with an LAB value of Pantone 185. And the importance of this is LAB values are way better at color matching than CMYK values. CMYK on just about every computer and every printer is going to slightly shift. That's because that's just the nature of what CMYK is. But when you're looking at an LAB value, that's more so the color lightness measurement. So it's way more accurate to print with LAB values than it is with CMYK values. Not saying you can't print with CMYK values, but when you want to match colors to specific Pantone colors, LAB values can be way more accurate. Because if you have a profile that's made for your print media and you have the LAB values, 9 times out of 10, the color is going to come out accurate because the profile's made for that media, so the color's going to match. So again, you can do that. If you have spot colors that are called out, these Pantone colors, these Pantone input colors. So if I say instead of making this a CMYK value, I made it Pantone 185. Where'd it go? Pantone 185U. Oh, it's uncoded. So if I made it Pantone 185C for coded, what'll happen is because this library right here is checked, it'll actually automatically apply that color because anywhere it sees the spot color with this name, it'll replace it with that LAB value. And the same thing goes for any color library. You can also create your own color library. Say you do a lot of sports teams for your high school, and they have an arbitrary color that isn't a Pantone color that you just matched with colors with CMYK value. You can create your own library in here, make that a CMYK value, make it a CMYK value, name it Spartans Blue, and now anywhere in your art file that's named spot color Spartans Blue, it'll automatically replace it with that CMYK value. So our color libraries are definitely powerful tool. Used a lot with obviously matching like businesses and corporate colors. But it's also really big for textile and apparel as well. We get a lot of textile where people want colors, like they know the colors that they want. They don't really care about the rest. They just want those colors. And our color libraries are very powerful when it comes to automation, essentially for matching colors. Because there are files that you can have that have hundreds of colors, and you don't want to sit there and replace every color. If all the colors are already called out, then you don't have any input for you. I can kind of give you a better example of this one. I think this one has a bunch. Yeah, this one has too many. But you can kind of get the gist of like, it'll replace anything in here that's blinking. I can replace all of these colors separately if I wanted to. So yeah. Next thing I want to go over is going to be spot color, or I'm sorry, special plate, not spot color. So we'll go back to the Mimaki logo. Yeah, the Mimaki logo. So say with this Mimaki logo, I wanted to print it, but I want to print this on a black media. I can definitely print it as is. The only problem is if you print color onto black, it's going to get washed out. So all printing is intended to be printed on a white media. That's how color profiles are made. That's how it knows that the white point of the media gives it that undertone essentially. When you print anything to something that's not black, or I'm sorry, something that's not white, whatever that color is takes on the undertone of the color you print on top of it. Because all UV ink is slightly translucent, aside from our opaque whiting. But all other UV ink is, so your C, your Y, your M, and your K, and obviously clear ink is going to be translucent. So what we do is we have the option for special plates. And special plate allows you to print or create a layer of a special color without having to go back to your designer and say, hey, I'm also doing white. Can you make me a white file? And then I'll color replace it. And then I can actually layer them together and then print. With special plate, say I only have a color file. And now after the fact, I'm like, oh, they sent black media as well. And I need to print, the logo on the black media as well. I can actually go in here. I've selected white. I want to print it at 100%. There are 3 options that you have available for printing special plates. You have whole image, and I believe actually I might have a slide that better dictates this. I want to see real quick. I do. I'm going to change screens really quick just so you can kind of see it, and then we'll go back. It didn't change. Hold on. I think it changed now. Yes. Okay. So valid. There's two options. There's old image where basically it'll print, like you see like this dotted line. It'll basically flood the entire image with that special color. So here with white ink, it would flood the whole thing with white ink. And then the other two options were valid pixel and valid pixel non-background. Valid pixel non-background, basically, if you do valid pixel, anywhere there's a pixel of color, it'll put a pixel of whatever special color it was, in this case, white. The problem with that is anywhere that there's white in your image, it won't put a pixel behind that. So if I'm printing this image right here on the original image on a black substrate, what'll happen is everywhere that's white will be the substrate color, which means that you won't see white ink where I want white to be. So we came out again, updates, very important, with valid pixel to non-background. And basically what that does is it fills in the areas that are, it basically looks at it as a whole shape and says, okay, this is a whole shape. There shouldn't be any openings in that whole shape. Let me close it all in. So you can kind of notice the difference between valid pixel and valid pixel non-background. Very good for like decals, as you can see, because it doesn't, wash out those areas that you want it to actually print white ink or clear ink. And again, those are just check boxes. I'm going to swap back over to the other screen. Mm. Oh, I think it never took it out. Well, I think it was showing both of them. There we go. Okay. Um, so yeah, I can do valid pixel or valid pixel non-background. In this case, because it's just, how come when I click valid to non-background it errors every time? Um, that I'm not sure. Do you know what the error says? Because I'll demonstrate it right here. If I click valid to non-background, um, and then I could have it not composite it immediately. But because I already know that like I just want white underneath it, I'm just gonna composite it automatically. And then you'll see right here, now it's linked together with the white on bottom, color, and then my color. I'm not sure why yours would be giving an error. Um, I guess if you want to tell me like what the error says, that might be able to help. Um, But yeah, you're able to do that with clear as well. If I wanted to do a clear layer, I could have selected clear and put that on top. So special plate, really, really, really powerful tool. Um, special plate allows you to basically make those special colors immediately without having to make a separate file for them. Let me take a look at this picture. Oh, so
I
wait,
know what
is it?
that is. It's what
Uh,
it is if you have a image and you have vector images in it and you have raster images in it, then what it's telling you is it's the valid pixel non-background is only going to work with the vector images. With the raster image, you'll notice that it just fills the whole image area of the raster image with white. It doesn't make it properly, and it's just letting you know, hey, double check that plate to make sure you're getting the results you're wanting.
Yes, yes, that's perfect. Thank you, Carissa. And basically what she's getting on there is there's a difference between raster and vector art. In order for RasterLink to know where the edges of the art is, same way how it does color replacement, it has to be vector. If it's not vector, it doesn't know where the edges are essentially, so it can't fill it in. And that's why you're getting the error with the non-background. But you should still be able to use valid pixel. The only solution for that one will be basically, you can use Photoshop artwork. The question was basically, are you not be able to use Photoshop? You can definitely use Photoshop artwork. Basically what'll happen is you'll have to create like this option, valid pixel to non-background, is just an option, right? But the other way to do it would be you would have to make the layer yourself. Or yeah, you can utilize monocolor as well. And I can actually demonstrate that really quickly. Because I utilize that a lot for when I do multiple layers. So you can kind of see here, there's like a lot of files in here that are like just yellow or just magenta. These are basically layered files. Like if I sit here for a second, this was my clear file. You can see right there, it says clear, gold hand, clear. This is my clear file. So I already know that if I go to the properties tab, this is kind of my little tips and tricks real quickly. But under properties tab for UV, there's an option right here called job attribute. I can click that and there's 3 options. Right now, generally everything's going to always be full color because you want to print full color. But I set this up specifically to be color replace. So I can color replace it with monocolor. When I select monocolor, basically it's going to take a source color, which my source color here was magenta, as you can see right there. So I'm going to select magenta, and I want to replace it with clear ink. Now, the differences between this and special plates. With special plates, if I want to do a special plate, I decide the values of clear that I want to put everywhere. So if I put 100% clear and I create a special plate, everywhere there's a pixel is going to put 100% clear. But say I have a gradient and I want to replace that gradient with a special color. If I use special plate, it's going to fill that entire gradient with 100% clear. But if I do monocolor replacement and replace it with clear, now it's going to do a gradient of that clear. And I can do the same thing with white ink as well. Say I wanted to, I know the yellow one was, I believe, supposed to be white. Yeah, this is the white one. So I can do monocolor, replace the yellow with white. And now this is going to color replace with white because you see now it changed from, the attribute changed from color to white. This was actually kind of, oh, because I didn't actually change this from monocolor. So if I hit OK, this one will change this one from magenta to clear. So these are great ways to kind of be able to, change and use gradients with special colors. I think Chris is helping him, so I'm gonna keep moving forward. Thank you, Carissa. Um,
I added a video that explains how to do monocolor in there.
okay, perfect. Thank you. Next thing we're gonna go down. So we've kind of got a majority of them. We did special plate, we did composition. Next thing's gonna be layering. And this one is a pretty simple one. It's gonna be this green tab right here. The layering tab. Oh, I just noticed that y'all can't see like the hover over things, but that's okay. It's gonna be the green tab on the right side. The layering tab, basically, if you have a file, you've already composited together, and you want to change how the layers interact with each other. The most common one is going to be uh, thickening and thinning your white layer or trapping the white ink underneath your color. There would be occasions, for instance, in this case, I wanted to thicken the white layer, or no, I didn't. I corrected the position. But if I wanted to trap the white layer, I can reduce it by pixels. And usually it could be, depending on your size of your artwork, I would say 2 to 3 is a good size. If your image is, several feet by several feet. You could probably go more than that. It just depends on how much bleed you have and, how much leeway you have. But generally speaking, for like most things, I do like anywhere between 2 to 4 pixels. That's about the average. And you can see exactly how much that is. It's less than 100th of an inch, which is very, very, very small. But basically what that allows you to do is trap that white ink, because if you're printing the color directly on top of white, what you'll notice is, because again, the white ink has a thickness, you're printing on top of media, not into the media. When the color goes on top of that, you kind of see the sandwiching of the color on top of the white. So if you make the white layer slightly smaller than the color layer, the color will kind of trap the edges of the white. So you're not seeing a slight halo around whatever it is you're printing. This is, again, something that's very common in printing. So I would definitely utilize this, especially when it comes to UV printing. Very, very powerful. Makes your prints look so much cleaner. Yeah, definitely utilize. And then if you're printing on a flatbed, sometimes thickening your uh, primer layer helps, because now your primer is expanded a little bit. That way, the adhesion is good for all the layers that go on top of that. And then you're also able to do, you can correct the position. So say when I was creating my art file, I accidentally shifted my white layer down a little bit. Instead of going back and resaving it out, I could just shift it here versus, going back to my artwork. Now, granted, yes, overall, you should probably fix your art file and not have to remember that, hey, I need to change this 8 pixels every time. But, sometimes it works smarter, not harder, is a better, solution. And if I can change it in this RIP software and I don't have to, do it again in the future, then why not, change it right here? Because the RIP software allows me to do it. We also have, I believe I already went over the color replacement, so we're good. The next 6 options are really kind of just like standard things. We'll go over favorites really quickly. Actually, I'm gonna skip over favorites because I have a great slide that I want to show you guys for that one. But duplications, pretty self-explanatory. You can duplicate print files. So if I click this one, I hit duplicate. I tell it how many times I want to duplicate it. It duplicates the file in the job list. Pretty simple. So that way I can have this one printing at one resolution, this one printing at one resolution with color on it, or white on it, and this one printing with clear on it. I don't know. I can also back up my jobs. Say you have like seasonal jobs and you did a whole bunch of work. Say for like this 5-layer print, I did a bunch of work, did a bunch of settings, changes, color replacement, whole bunch of stuff to it. And I want to remember everything I did to this job. Say customer comes back in 6 months and wants me to do the exact same thing again. I can back up the file by clicking back up. Oh, wait, that's not back up. Click back up. And then I can select backup, save this file somewhere on my computer, and then it'll save it as a RasterLink7 backup job. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put this on my desktop. Going to hit save. And it is now backing up the job. Should have probably did one smaller. I regret using that file. We'll give it a quick second, and then afterwards I can hit restore, and then literally yeah, perfect. So now I can hit restore, go to the desktop, find that file, which is this one right here. It's gonna be the RLAJ7. Hit OK, and now it should add another copy once it finishes loading. And that copy should match exactly the copy that I have on here. So it's already nested together, all the settings and everything that I had on here. Granted, I didn't do many settings on this one, but if I did have a bunch of color replacements and stuff like that, all of that stuff would be the same. So again, that's a very powerful tool, because remember, you can only have up to 200 jobs in RasterLink. So you can't indefinitely store everything in RasterLink. So you're definitely going to have to utilize backups if you want to, repeat printing. Or you could just keep the file saved as how you originally did it and just make the changes manually. The next thing is going to be delete. Delete should be pretty self-explanatory. You can select the file and hit delete. It's going to tell you delete 5 jobs. Yep. And then there's also an FAQ in here as well. Another thing that I want to mention is you can just right click on jobs and you get a bunch of like preliminary options as well. So like I can make this file go to the top, or I can duplicate this file from here, or I can select all 3 of these files and delete them by right clicking them. So some of the things that you can do by just right clicking, you don't have to actually use the tabs, but there's multiple ways to skin a cat, right? You can also print directly from here as well. Instead of clicking the execution tab, I can right click, rip and print, and it'll rip and print it from here if I know that everything is set up properly. Trying to think, I don't believe, let me go back to the other one just to make sure I covered everything. Let me just change the screen so y'all can see. Oh, and then this is the one that Carissa was talking about prior. Where is it? Monocolor. So like I said before, with monocolor, you're able to do gradients with specialty colors. It's really good for uh vector or raster image. It doesn't matter. It just has to be a cyan, a magenta, a yellow, or a black. If you have like a multicolor gradient or something like that and try to use monocolor, it kind of defeats the purpose because it's mono, which means one. So it has to be one of those channels of ink. You can only select one. And ideally, I would recommend utilizing one channel for one special color. So personally, I've utilized, just because I've gotten into the habit of it, I use cyan. I try to anyway. Use cyan for the clear ink, or yellow for clear ink, and then I use magenta for my white ink. That way, if I see a file and it has those colors, I automatically know that, hey, this has yellow in it. I know I need a monocolor to replace it to clear. Or hey, this has magenta. It's only a magenta file. I know I need a monocolor to replace that with white ink. Oh, and this kind of goes to exactly what I showed you on the screen. You can actually monocolor. Make sure you click the monocolor replacement, and make sure you hit OK, and that'll change the attribute from color to whatever the gradient's supposed to be, whether it's white, silver, clear, primer. I don't really see why you'd use gradient primer, but primer, as well as orange ink, I believe as well. Yeah, orange ink is also technically a special color. And this is another reason why you would do that. If you're printing to black media, you want to make sure that if you want to print white ink and you want it to be the image, you have to basically monocolor replace, because that's the only way you're going to be able to print the white ink. We went over the layers tab. A lot of these tabs, or a lot of the options that are in the presentation, I've gone over manually, because sometimes it's easier to kind of show you guys in the RIP software than it is for you guys to watch slides. And again, we'll be providing you guys with the PDF towards the end of this class. I just want to show you hands-on what that is. Layering, and then we also went over the layering tab. How do you do your compositions? So if you have 2 files, you can basically save out your clear layer, your color layer, and then bring it in a RasterLink and composite all 3 layers together. 3 layers is going to be your color white color. So if you have a clear media and say you have a welcome thank you image on like a door or enter exit, this is a good, actually scratch that. Color white color is going to be your backlit. So if you have something that's backlit, which means like light shining from the backside of it, like a light box, color white color is going to be how you make sure that those colors don't wash out. With the two layers of color, essentially when light hits it, light's obviously going to wash out anything. So with the two hits of color, it allows with the backlit on, the light basically is the true color. The next one's going to be 4-layer printing. This is probably one of the most design intuitive and coolest prints. With 4-layer printing, you're able to basically do a day and night print. So basically what happens is when the light is off, you get one image, and when the light is on, you get another image. And it's really cool. Obviously, the images have to be slightly similar, but you can kind of see here with the light off, you get the image that's on the left. And when the light on, you can kind of see the third layer that says summer nights. There's like lights that shine, and basically what happens is the lights on the cars will shine, and it'll show summer nights, and the sky goes from day to night because the bottom layer, there's stars in the skies and stuff like that, versus it just being a sunny day. So day and night images are very, very, very cool. We usually try to utilize those a lot at Mimaki, just because it's such an underutilized application. We do get some people that use it for like movie posters and things like that, but it's definitely an utterly utilized application that I like to see a lot out in the field. Our roller roll UCJV 300 and UCJV 330 definitely excel at this application. And then we also have 5-layer printing, which again, our roller roll UCJV 300, UCJV 330, both can print up to 5 layers. With 5-layer printing, you have a true double-sided image, or a opaque double-sided image, which means you can have two different images on both sides. So what it does, it prints color, white, a black layer in between the block out, another white layer, and then color. So that way, if you hold it up to the light, the other image does not shine through the middle because of that black blockout layer. We went over this about the thickening and thinning your layers, as well as you can also do the position correction. So you can track your white ink, or you can change the position if your layers aren't lining up properly. We do also have a lot of guides on our website, Mimaki.com, as well as Mimaki USA. I'm sure there's links on there as well. Please, please, please utilize those. A lot of these guides literally give you step-by-step on click this button, now do this, now do this. So I know I kind of went through it on the screen with you, but if you still have questions, definitely download these PDFs and utilize them, because clear printing is probably something that just adds value to your prints. RasterLink tools. So with RasterLink tools, hold on one second. I think I might have skipped something. Let me just double check really quickly. Uh, okay, we haven't got to it yet. Okay, perfect. So RasterLink tools is basically going to be our RasterLink plugin. And basically all that allows is, if you're not proficient in Illustrator or CorelDRAW, RasterLink tools basically gives you everything you need to know to basically do a print and cut job without having to learn those two softwares. Because we can't expect everybody that wants to print to be Illustrator proficient or CorelDRAW proficient. So if you want to just know the basics on like, hey, I want this image and I want to create a cut line, RasterLink tools allows you to do that. Basically, it allows you to click your shape. That first tool, basically, for instance, is your cut line creator. You click your shape, you click that tool, and it basically automatically makes it the spot color it needs to be, and the thickness it needs to be, and names it. So it basically not automates because you still have to click the button, but it basically makes everything easier for you. Oh, and here's kind of an example. So you can basically create cut lines, you can do extractions, and then you can also immediately output it to RasterLink. You can make Braille. Braille is another thing that's added on here as well. Multi-layer printing as well as 2.5D output, which is basically taking a grayscale image and printing a buildup of texture with color or clear ink, depending on what option you choose, whether you're doing faster quality. And basically it does like a texture print using that grayscale image. So you say, hey, I want it to print 0.5, the thickness of the ink be 0.5 millimeters, but use this grayscale image to build up that texture. And basically it builds it in the Z-axis as well, which is really, really neat. Very similar to kind of how our 3D printers work, but in a not fully 3D, so that's why we call it 2.5D. And then we also have, like I said, the Braille option. We are actually able to do ADA Braille on our flatbeds, our UJF series, as well as our GFX 200 series now. So you can do ADA Braille on those, and this just allows you to basically select your Braille dots and click that button. It'll automatically change it to Braille, so that way the printer will know how to build up those Braille dots. Oh, and then we also have a full TTT video, tips, tricks, and techniques on how it's using actually this artwork, on how basically that processes work. It goes through the whole design on, like, make sure your Braille's converted to this font size, which is 24 point. Make sure go type and create outlines. And it goes through the full process of make sure you click this checkbox. Make sure your color is this color. And you can use it with the RasterLink7. It outputs it to RasterLink7, and then you can print it from there like we were doing before. With this one, RasterLink7, there are optimal EPS settings that we recommend, especially when you're printing multi-layer prints. Basically, you can export your files in multiple layers versus just, manually turning your layers on and off. Both work. It's just like a workflow with RasterLink that you're able to do. And then yeah, this is still more with the Braille. We'll just skip over that for now. As well as I do want to just touch on this for anyone that's interested in Braille. ADA compliant Braille. There's a lot that is involved with ADA compliance. Mimaki only provides the compliance for the sections that you see here on the screen, which is the depth, the thickness, the roundness of the dots, the height, that sort of thing. But there's also like color, there's also type, there's font. There's a lot of things that the printer itself doesn't control when it comes to ADA compliance. And just for legality reasons, I have to stress that, make sure not only you're following your part of the ADA side, and we'll make sure that the printer is compliant for what the printer is responsible for. Print and cut. Because I'm looking at the time and time definitely flies. I am going to,
Well, we're going to do a class just over print and
yeah,
cut pretty soon. So we're going to kind of skim over this pretty quickly on this print and cut, but we will have an upcoming class kind of going over this a little bit more, but please download that presentation because it does have a step-by-step for you.
yes, definitely check that out. The next thing I want to touch on is and there's a lot of things in here. I'll briefly go over it. There's a lot of things going on in here as far as like we have different cuts that we can do versus contour cut and half cut. Half cut basically means like we're cutting all the way through but leaving it with tabs. Contour cut is like where you're basically like just cutting through the vinyl and not cutting all the way through the paper part. You can do both of those cuts at the same time. We have a lot of different blades. We have the swivel blades. We have part numbers for like our sheet cutting blade. We have our XY slitter blades. We have different types of blades that go in there depending on if you're cutting like, for instance, regular, pressure sensitive vinyl versus printing reflective vinyl, because reflective vinyl has like that, it needs to have like a harder, finer blade. So we have a lot of different blades available for that as well. I kind of went over already the crop marks and search positions and everything. The edit screen is going to be kind of where you control, like, if you have multiple cuts, you can basically assign each cut line to a different cut profile on your machine. So say I had cut 1 be my kiss or my contour cut or kiss cut, and cut 2 is my half cut. I'll make sure in RasterLink under cut edit, I would make cut 1 be my kiss cut and cut 2 be my half cut. And that way the printer will know, okay, anywhere there's this color, I'll do the half cut. Anywhere there's this color, I'll do the kiss cut. And then before, I also mentioned the ID cut function. ID cut, basically we have a software called Cutting Link server. And basically anytime you do a print and cut job, it saves the cut job with the barcode associated with it. And then basically whenever the machine reads that barcode, it knows to pull that cut job because it's already assigned to the barcode. So really cool. I have a full video on that shows the efficiency of print and cut. Or, I'm sorry, the print and cut ID cut efficiency. Really, really neat. And this kind of shows you basically there's a check mark, or if you're going to just use print cut without ID cut or just print and cut with ID cut. It's basically just a checkbox for that. We're not going to spend too much time on this because this kind of goes over like what is it and how you set it up and that sort of thing. But if you do want more information, just feel free to just check out that video or check out the links in this PDF. Fine Cut 9, I do want to touch on this briefly. Anyone that has a machine that's a print and cut unit, if you want to use it, so it can be a printer only, you don't have to use the plotter on it, or it could be a print and cut unit, or it could be just a cutter. So if you just want to do cut vinyl letters, you can do that as well. If you're doing just cutting, you have to have Fine Cut 9 software, because if you're not doing any printing, RasterLink it can't just do cutting. It has to do printing and cutting essentially. Well, I guess, yeah, it actually can do just cutting. Now I'm just thinking about that. But Fine Cut 9, Fine Cut 9 is also our plotting software as well. It's used for just our plotters only, so it also translates to our print and cut models as well. And you can kind of see on the list that there's a lot of print and cut models as well as just plotters as well. We also have a plugin for Illustrator and Corel, just like how we have our RasterLink tools. We have a Fine Cut 9 tools as well for RasterLink and Corel. Again, just simple tools in there that allow you to make things easier. It is a plugin, so in order to cut, you have to have Illustrator or Corel Draw in order to run Fine Cut 9. It's basically just a plugin with the design software. And basically this window pops up and you basically just assign like the colors to the tools. So whether you're doing creasing or you're doing cut all the way through. We also have our new CFX, which allows for routing. So you can, if you're routing as well, there's a lot of different functions that you can do within Fine Cut 9. And then we have a video as well that goes over the full specs of Fine Cut 9. I'm not going to watch the video here, but just know it's in the PowerPoint. And then obviously we have our CGAR shameless plug real quick. It's our 54-inch as well as a 32-inch plotter that can be with or without a stand depending on what you need. Very fast, Ethernet compatible, as well as it has our Mimaki MRA, which is our remote access. Basically, the control panels on a lot of our newer models you can control using an app on your phone, which is really neat. And then before, like I was saying, RasterLink tools, we have a video on how to utilize RasterLink tools as well. If you would like to check that out. RasterLink tools, again, if you're not proficient in Illustrator or CorelDRAW, definitely utilize RasterLink tools. It gives you basically your one-stop shop for creating cut lines and outlines and things like that for files. Next, oh, and this kind of goes over all of that. But one that I definitely want to cut on is creating spot colors. If you're ever doing um, cut lines and you want to create cut contour half. So whenever you're creating a cut line, the name for it is cut contour, which you can see right there. But if you want to have two different cut lines in a job file, obviously you're going to have to name the second one a different name. So generally speaking, we usually use cut contour half, but you can also use cut contour 2, cut contour full cut. It could be anything as long as it says cut contour, whatever. Um, and basically, RasterLink will separate those two cut lines and know, based off of the name, you can kind of generally tell like which one's which. Uh, okay, she's got that. Some common tips that we've kind of noticed in Illustrator, which are some things that I'd probably recommend. Whenever you're doing print and cut jobs, this is a very, very common thing that we get all the time. Uh, if you're ever noticing that your file is printing it and then when it cuts it, it seems like it's cutting it out twice. Probably what's happening is your Illustrator settings are converting your strokes to outline or your text to outlines or something is being converted to outlines when you save the file out. There are a lot of checkboxes when you save out files that are people just kind of just hit OK and don't really read them. So this screen right here, transparencies, a lot of times these boxes are automatically checked depending on what preset you have selected. So if you ever notice that your file is like double cutting, check out this slide and kind of follow its instructions and make sure that those things are unchecked. Because if they are converting it to outlines, not necessarily the machine that's double cutting, it's the art file has 2 cuts in it. I do also want to mention, because I don't think I mentioned that at all yet, RasterLink7 is able to have, I want to say 4 or 5 different types of files. You can have EPS and PDF and TIFF files, which hold vector images, so very good for print and cut. And then you can have, it can also print JPEG images as well if you're just printing. But if you want to do print and cut, the 2 most common ones are going to be EPS and then PDF files. Those would be the best 2 files that'll hold vector art files or vector artwork, which means like if your cut line gets converted to raster, it won't read it anymore because it doesn't read it as a vector line anymore. So it has to be a vector art file, which means EPS or PDF. And this is just an explanation on how you get high quality raster images. Make sure you're saving it out as 300 DPI or PPI, depending on how you're saving it out. But 300 is kind of like the industry standard on high quality. I mean, you can go up to as high as like 600, but at that point, you're kind of like overkilling the dots per inch. So 300 is probably like your general size. Let's see, we got a couple more minutes. I know we might be a little bit over, but I do want to show you guys really quick machine maintenance. Following this machine maintenance, ideally will extend the life of your machine drastically. Just imagine if you didn't get your oil changed in your car regularly, or you didn't get a car wash regularly, or you didn't, just maintenance in general on anything. If you're not doing your preventative maintenance and issues arise, I mean, that's kind of the things that happen. So we have a preventative maintenance list that we kind of recommend that everybody do. Overall, every machine is going to have some type of capping station, some type of wiper blade, and some type of filters that it has to maintain and replace. If you have one of the 330 series machines, your wipers are going to be the cloth wipers, which means you literally just get to replace it and you're done. If you don't have a 330 machine, your wipers are going to be the blue plastic wipers, which means you have to make sure that you're taking that cleaning solution and you're wiping it and making sure that there's no dried ink on there. Same thing with the capping station. And actually, I think it's on the next slide. Yeah, right here. Basically, you're taking a lint-free swab, you're wiping around your print head or the whites of your print head. Never touch the actual print head, but anywhere where you see like the tannish red color. Basically making sure that there's, no dried ink, no dust or anything like that on the bottom of your carriage. And then also your capping station. So here's a perfect example of what a 330 looks like. You can see the blue area is going to be your caps. That's basically going to be the part that's sealing your print head. And then on the left, you can kind of see the cloth wiper. Again, if you don't have a 330, you're going to have a blue wiper there. I don't think I have that one on here, but it's going to be a blue little wiper blade, and you're basically going to replace that if needed, or make sure you're cleaning it if you don't need to replace it. And again, these two things are very, 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 very important for the life of your machine. The print heads are probably the most expensive part on your machine. If you're doing this preventative maintenance, it extends the life of that print head. If you're not doing this preventative maintenance, the life of the print head is going to be the life of the print head, essentially. Um, and this kind of goes over, I don't want to get too deep into those. We also want to make sure that you are changing out your waste ink container. That's going to be below where the print head capping station is at. It should be like right beneath it, no matter what machine you have. And basically, all the machines have a counter that basically lets you know when that waste ink tank is at 80%. Some of them are weighted, others are you have to reset the counter, and then you have to make sure, like under section 4 here, it says replace waste ink level. Basically, once you replace it, you empty it out, you reset the counter back to 0, and then basically whenever the machine does its own self-cleanings, it knows how much ink is going into that waste ink. So that's how the counter is accounted for. But if you aren't, say I reset the counter and I don't empty my waste ink, the machine's not going to know. So I've run into a lot of instances where that waste ink overflows because someone reset the counter and forgot to actually change it out. So my recommendation is always empty it first and then reset it. You can even if you empty it and forget to reset it, it's still going to remind you to empty it, and then you can be like, "Oh, I just emptied it," and then you can just reset it. And then we also have your ink discharge path. So basically, underneath the capping station, I can kind of go back. You can kind of see like this little metal area in the middle. And that's basically where like your waste ink feeds down into the waste ink tank. Um, Basically you drop a few drops of the cleaning solution in there to kind of break apart ink that might have built up. Because you don't want that to clog up, because if that clogs up, then now nothing goes into your waste ink. Okay, waste ink there. And then also shaking your eco cases. So if you have any machine with white ink, any eco solvent machine, any DTF machine, you're going to be told to shake your cases or shake your ink bottles. Make sure you're utilizing or doing that. If you have white ink specifically, white ink is a mixture of like white pigment and titanium. That's how it kind of gets its white. So it eventually settles if left unstirred over time. So I believe it's like every 24 hours, you're making sure that you are shaking that white ink and it agitates the titanium back into, like its liquid form. This kind of goes more over extended storage. We also have in the manual, if you have like, say you're going to be gone for, I don't know, I know we just left winter vacation, but say you were going to be gone for winter vacation or summer vacation, say it's like at a school or something. We have extended storage options where basically you can leave the machine in a certain setting over extended period of time, up to, I want to say it's like a couple weeks, maybe up to a month. But the term is, or the length of time is specific in the manual. And then also, I would always recommend contacting your dealer. Your dealer is going to be your first line of defense for anything you want to do with the machine. So if you're going to be gone for a couple of weeks and like you're unsure if your printer is going to be in workable order when you come back, like hit up your dealer and be like, hey, like what do I need to do to make sure that when I come back on Monday after wherever I'm going, I can start printing, and they'll walk you through all those steps. But this is kind of going over what that step actually looks like if you need to know what that is. This screen right here, I know I saw Mecca post it earlier on. Probably, if you don't get anything from this webinar, please see this screen. Um, this phone number, we're open. Mimaki has its own call center. We're open from 8:30 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. Eastern time, because we also have a call center in the West Coast as well. So 8:30 to 8:30 Eastern. We also have the Mimaki call center, na.service@mimaki.com. Those two phone numbers, if for whatever reason you're unable to get the answer from your dealer or unable to get in contact with your dealer, these two avenues, this phone number and this email, is always monitored by several people. And even if they don't know the answer, what ends up happening is they contact either myself or someone on the print solution side or applications team, where we can get more into detail. So whether it's something technical where you're getting errors, or something like, I'm not sure how to produce this product or this application, utilize this phone number, the 888-530-3992, or the NA service at Mimaki.com. Those will be your two biggest forms of contact with Mimaki. Because then from there, they can delegate it to whoever it needs to go to. Yeah, and then obviously please have your serial number available. They'll go through a line of questioning with you, and then you just have to provide them the information, and then they can help you out. It's fully free. Obviously, if it comes to a point where like, oh, we have to send a technician because we can't really help you over the phone, that sort of thing, then that's a different story, depending on whether it's under warranty, that sort of thing. But the phone call and the emails, they're free services. We don't charge for those things. So definitely utilize them, because they're there.